Charter School is a tuition-free K-12 school that offers a superior college preparatory educational option for this community and its families. Now we would like to take a moment of silence. Before we move on to agenda item number 3, I would like to take a motion to move the closed session to the end of our agenda. So we don't have it in the middle.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Go ahead and move that. Number 3 is public comments. Do we have any public comments?
No, ma'am.
All right, number 4 is awards and recognition.
All right, so we're getting a little feedback. Test. Over the weekend, the cast of Piedmont's production of The Music Man performed on the stage of the Bloomy Awards alongside the other top 5 high schools. Piedmont was named a top 6 finalist for Best Musical, Best Actress, Ray Thomas, Best Costume Designer, Charlotte Roberts. The Bloomy Awards celebrate achievement in musical theater among high schools in the greater Charlotte area. Congratulations to Mrs. Perry, Mrs. Painter, and Miss Jench and the entire Music Man crew. They did a phenomenal job. Piedmont's class of 2026 has 19 seniors who, by the end of this summer, will have earned their associate's degree from Gaston College through the College Now program. Thanks to their hard work and academic drive, these students have not only saved tens of thousands of dollars in college tuition, they have already taken a major step towards their future and college goals. We're so excited. Congratulations to the recipients of the PCCS Scholar Athlete Award, Celeste Cobb and Eli Grant. This award recognizes 2 outstanding senior athletes who represent Piedmont's portrait of a graduate, acting with honor and integrity, and are academically prepared for college. Celeste and Eli each received a $1,500 college scholarship. Celeste has committed to the U.S. Army Reserve before going on to a 4-year university, and Eli Grant will attend UNC Chapel Hill this fall. The Ann Beam Morgan Memorial Scholarship was awarded to senior Jenny Liu, who will attend the University of Chicago this fall. This is a $1,500 scholarship awarded annually to 1 student from the graduating class. Jenny's winning essay was selected as the best reflection of Piedmont's portrait of a graduate.
Okay, moving to number 5, approval of our previous minutes in the packet.
I make a motion to approve last week.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passed. Thank you. Okay, moving to reports. First up, we have treasurer and finance.
All right, so I do have quite a few things to go over tonight, and so I'll start with just going over the monthly budget report from April 1st through April 30th. The total revenue for the month of April was $2,478,201.87. The total expenses for the month was $1,648,548.74. That left us with a net surplus before the investment of $829,653.13. After the investment account, our net surplus for the month is $1,022,122.69. Moving over to the surplus and cash statement for the month of April, in the operating account at Truist, there's $4,372,229.52. In the student activities account, there's $173,264.90. In the investment account at fair market value, there's $3,454,240.23, plus the petty cash of $1,000 gives us a total of $8,734.65. The anticipated cash position, the cash and investments on hand as of June 30th of 2025, which was audited, was $7,393,536, plus the current year budgeted surplus of $1,461,875.25, less the fund balance appropriations of $1,755,585.81, gives us an expected cash and investments on hand as of June 30th, 2026, of $7,099,825.44. Once you back out the amount held in the PNC investment account, it gives us an expected cash available as of June 30th of $3,645,585.21. What I do want to point out is in the fund balance appropriations, that has gone up about $1 million, and that's because that includes the approved amount that the approved amount from last month for the projects this summer. Moving down to the U.S. bank account, in the bond fund, the ending balance as of August 30th is $824,124.75. In the debt service reserve fund, there's $1,794,029.74. In the repair and replacement account, we're still dealing with a whopping 7 cents. And that gives us the total funds held by U.S. Bank of $2,618,154.56. Any questions about any of the statements that I just went over? Okay, and so I do need to get approval on the audit engagement. So we are now up for the school audit and the 401k audit, and so there's 2 different audits that has to be done, and so there's going to be a slight increase on the school audit to $17,250. It's going to still be done by DMJPS, which is the auditors that have previously done it. They're just under a new name because they kind of merged with another company. And so there's a slight increase this year of about $300. Last year was about $16,950. And so that's one of the approvals that I'll need to get. And the other is going to be on the 401k audit. And so this year, the audit is going to cost $20,000. Last year, it was $17,500, and so that's a slightly more increase, and it's all because the assets have gone up in the retirement account. And so when the auditors looked at what they did last year and the amount of time they had to incorporate, that's led to the increase in the fee. So it's about a $2,500 increase. Any questions? Anything that you want me to explain a little bit more before it's presented for a motion? All right.
So you have the 401k audit, and then what's the other audit?
The school audit.
School financial audit?
Mm-hmm. And so if there's no questions, if I can get the board to make a motion for approval, and I'll need it on both.
Make a motion to approve the
Yes.
Sorry, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. And so Ms. Claire is going to go over the projected budget for next year, and do you have a presentation? Okay, so we'll need to step in.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? My mic working? Okay. Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
That's better. Okay, so this is just a short presentation for the 2027 preliminary budget. So this is a snapshot of what I'm going to go over in the next few slides. Projected total revenue for 2027 is $19,456,637.14 against total projected expenses for 2027 of $18,924,583.08, leaving us a projected surplus of $532,054.06. So you can see over on the right-hand side the increase in our expenses, the decrease in our revenue, and a decrease in our surplus. I will go ahead and tell you that the decrease in our revenue is due almost entirely to the fact that Gaston County commissioners gave Gaston County schools a $10 million, I think they called it a bailout, back in March. And so we received our portion of that at the beginning of April, which increased our projected surplus for this year dramatically. We talked about that some last month. So we are not anticipating that again next year, so that's what that decrease in the revenue is. I want to go ahead and say that first, because those are some alarming numbers that I've put up there, but there's a reason why. So, all right, so going back to our planning allotment, so the state has issued the planning allotment for this upcoming year. Our per pupil allotment is $6,594. That is an increase of $105, and this is a per pupil amount. So it's an increase of $105 per pupil over our current year. That resulted in an increase in our state-based funding of $209,264.82. As a side note, the Low Wealth County supplemental funding that we talked about last year at this meeting, and we've talked about it some throughout the year as well, has been restored to be more consistent with the historical levels. Prior to the increase, there was about a 135% increase last year, the 24-25 year, and then, as we've talked about, the 90% decrease for this year. But the projections for the upcoming year, it has been restored back to kind of a normal level. Our portion of Low Wealth County supplemental funding, which is included in our base funding, is $236,533. So our EC funding, based on the planning allotment, is $15,785 less than our allotment for 2026. We did have some small increases in our school technology and limited English proficiency allotments that total about $5,273. And then there's some non-recurring revenue that we received this year that I did not budget for next year. For school connectivity, we received $97,262 this current year for replacement of network switches. That work was all done last summer, so we won't receive that allotment again, but we also won't have that expense again. I did take out the allotment for our test result bonuses. Those are something that's an allotment we would get in January every year, and it's based on our test scores from the prior year, and we use that to give specific teachers that are identified by the state bonuses. So I reduced our revenue by that amount, but I also reduced the expense line by that amount. We received two other smaller allotments this year, supplemental state funds. I believe it was actually called supplemental state allotment of $24,589, and then a pay plan reserve of $13,728 that I've not accounted for or not budgeted for this upcoming year either. Those just are reflective of some extra funds that DPI had that they distributed to all the LEAs, and the charters got their per pupil share as well. You can go ahead. Okay, so I put this together just to kind of go back and look at our per pupil allotment over the past 3 years, and then looking up to next year. So if you look down at the second line from the yellow highlighted line where it says that has the years, going over to the 23-24 school year, we have our dollar amount per pupil. That year was $6,279.62. And of course, we just multiply that by our ADM or our head count to get our base funding, which was $12,188,742.42 that year. That year, and in the prior years that I don't have up here, the supplemental funds for teacher compensation came separately as a separate allotment. Starting this year, it was rolled into our base allotment, our base funding. So I thought it would be interesting just to take a look at what our revised ADM would have been in the 2 previous years that extra allotment came for the supplemental funds for teacher compensation, and see what that would be. So if you added that to the base funding for 23-24, that bumped up our ADM, our dollar per ADM, to $6,397.68. And then last year is the year that we did get a little extra in our base funding for the Low Wealth County supplemental funding. So our base funding last year was $12,688,225.60. But if you, again, add in that extra allotment we got, the supplemental funds for teacher compensation, and then also last year we got an additional allotment that they described as a legislated increase adjustment. That allotment was reflective of the new state salary schedule to give the step increases and raises to our teachers. Prior to last year, that amount had always been rolled into our base funding, and our per pupil amount was revised. Last year was the first time I ever saw them not putting it in base funding and revising our per pupil amount. So for last year, if you take our original base funding and then add in the supplemental funds for teacher compensation and that legislated increase adjustment, it bumps our base funding up to over $13 million and our per pupil amount to $6,686.11. And then you can see in the current year, when the supplemental funds for teacher compensation were rolled into the base funding, of course, we had a reduction there because of that 90% reduction in the Low Wealth County funding as well. And then, as we know, the state never did pass a budget, so we don't have a new salary schedule, so there were no allotments for teacher raises. So our dollar per pupil amount stayed at $6,488.63. So we're still about $200 less than the year before. And then looking ahead, our dollars per ADM has gone up, like I said, $105, but we're still about $100 less than we were in the 24-25 school year. So I just wanted to kind of give you that analysis, give you some context. All right, so this slide breaks down our state funding for next year. Again, our base funding, our per pupil amount of $6,594 from the planning allotment times our budgeted ADM of $1,986, which was our ADM this year. So that gives us an increase to our base funding over the current year of $209,264.82. The next line down is our EC funding. And based on our planning allotment, it shows a decrease of $15,785. The next line is our EL, or English Learner Funds. Based on our planning allotment, there's a small increase there of $4,737. The next four lines are based on our current year allotments. And then you come down to school connectivity, where we got the $97,000 allotment this year that we won't get in the upcoming year. The next two lines are based on the current year allotments. And then, of course, the test result bonuses, I didn't include that. I will update the budget next January if we get that. The school technology allotment of $23,684 is based on the planning allotment. It's a small increase there. And then you've got those two allotments there at the end, a supplemental state allotment and the pay plan reserve that I'm not allotting for. And then the last line is our North Carolina virtual public school students. Those are the kids that take classes online, and those seats, cost us money, and that comes out. So we spent $27,042 this year on NCVPS seats, and I've just based our allotment next year on that as well. So the bottom line, so for next year, we're looking at a total state revenue of $14,609,108. This year, it was $14,561,546.18. So even though there's a pretty big bump there in our base funding, once we look at all the other allotments and all the other little pieces of funding that come from the state, we're netting out a smaller increase of $47,561.82. Okay, so this slide shows our projected local revenue. I've kept everything the same except that Gaston County funding, which I restored back down to what I had originally projected it at, because again, we're not going to get that big. I don't think the county commissioners are going to give the county schools that big bailout again. So we're just back to our normal levels there. So that was a reduction of $735,431.80. And this shows our federal revenue. Some of our federal planning allotments have been released, and those are noted. For the other federal programs where the planning allotments haven't been released, I have used the current year's allotment amount. The reductions there are reflective of the fact that we had some carryover amounts from last year that we carried into this year, and we spent those down. So we're just looking at the allotment amounts for this year. So our two biggest federal grants are our Title I and the IDEA grants. IDEA is for EC kids. The IDEA funds are used exclusively for salaries and benefits. And then the Title I funds, about 80% of those funds are spent on salaries and benefits. Between those two programs, we employ 14 teachers. All right, so moving down, I'm just going to go through the salaries that had changes. So our salaries line has increased by $148,298.03. That is due to one new teaching position for high school computer science. That position is currently open. We're holding it open at the top pay. We also had a part-time math teacher position that changed to full-time. Also, we had two positions this year where the teacher left in the first semester, and so they were filled by interims for the rest of the year, but they have currently been filled with teachers at top pay, so there's an increase there. At the time that I put this together, we had 6 open teaching positions also being held at top pay. I say at the time I put this together because I know our directors have been working really hard to get those positions filled. And also, finally, this does not include any step increases or raises. So line 2, our benefits line, there was an increase to the benefits line of $92,097.56. 78.5% of that increase is due to a 5% increase in the state health plan. That was $72,250. This is also following a 5% increase in the state health plan in our current year. So we're looking at a 10% increase in the past 2 years in the state health plan. And then the rest of that increase for that line is the Social Security and retirement costs, because that's a percentage of our salaries line. So that increase was just under $20,000.
Say too that in the state health plan, like we were doing long-term planning, we were looking at 4% increases year to year, so that is 20% larger than we had anticipated, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
That's right, yep. Okay, line 3, our books and supplies, there was a small increase there of $8,125.55. Those reflect some federal grant expenses that I moved up from a line lower down for Title I, Title III, and Title IV. Line 4, technology, a small decrease of $4,172. Again, those are some federal grant expenses that I moved around to different lines. This is Title III and Title IV. Equipment and leases, line 5, there's an increase there of $15,000. That's reflective of some computer hardware expenses that we had budgeted for originally, but they got moved down to our capital expenses line in line 15, and I always reset that line to 0, so I moved that $15,000 back up to line 5. Line 6 is our contracted student services. There's a small increase there of $1,836.60. There was a lot of moving around in that line. Our SRO contract increased by $21,963.85. That's for 3 separate SRO contracts or officers, salaries, I should say. I added a line for student record storage of $5,000. I decreased, we had a placeholder in there for Title IV services. I decreased that by $36,603 and split that between lines 3 and 5. And then I increased our EC services by $7,802.55. That's just based on our current year. Staff development, line 7, there was an increase there of $5,134. I increased our Fund 1. Fund 1 is our state expenses. That's just our regular expenses. That staff development expense line of about $8,702 to reflect our current year expenses. And then I decreased our Title II, that's a federal expense line, by $3,568 to reflect that federal planning allotment. Administrative services, line 8. The audit services increased by $7,100. A portion of that is reflective of the increase in the engagement letters, and then the rest of that is this past year we were able to use some of the funds that were in a forfeiture account for our 401k plan to offset some of the expenses for that 401k audit, and I moved that back into our regular expense lines. Also, Prestige School Solutions, which is our third-party accounting vendor, has increased their contract by $2,040 for next year. Line 9 is our insurances. I increased this to reflect our current year, and renewal will be available in June, and I'll adjust that line then. The rents and debt services, there's an increase there of $2,250. Our bond interest, actually, that expense decreased by $22,750, but the bond principal increased by $25,000, leaving us with a net increase to that line of $2,250. And then the last line that had changes was the capitalized expenses, which again, I zeroed that out. Part of that was for the network switches, and then part of it I moved up to the technology line. So then there were a few lines with no changes. Our facilities line, our utilities line, nutrition and food, and travel and transportation. I kept those at the current budgeted amounts. So that brings us back down to our projected surplus for next year of $532,054.06. Again, that is a decrease from our right now budgeted surplus of $929,445.44. Again, the bulk of that is just due to not receiving that extra income from Gaston County Schools next year. The projected debt service coverage ratio for next year is 1.3, which is within our requirements, and the days cash on hand is also within our requirements from our bond loan of 147.2 days. And this assumes that no fund balance appropriations will be made next year, and that the entirety of that surplus of $532 $532,054.06 will be added to our cash and investments on hand at year-end 2027. And as LaBarbara mentioned earlier, all of the fund balance appropriations for the current year, including the summer projects that were approved at last board meeting, have already been accounted for in our projected ending balances for this current year. And that's all I have.
A lot of information, but I do appreciate you taking the time to break it out like that. Okay, so Ms. Sullivan, you need to vote on that, correct?
Yes, we do have to take a vote on the proposed budget for next year.
Make a motion, we approve the 2026-27 projected budget. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Moving to item B, middle school report.
Good evening, everyone. The school directors are not here because they are at the Best of Gaston Award Gala. So hopefully we'll be hearing some good news soon. So the first report I have for you is the compliance submission report. And we only had to turn one thing in to the Office of Charter Schools, and that was the making sure the North Carolina School Report Card was on our website. And we submitted that on 4/17. Next, we have the enrollment reports. We have a total of 1,932 students, 672 in the elementary campus, 658 in the middle school campus, 602 at the high school. And all of our lottery spots are filled and paperwork received. We had two withdrawals that you can see there. And next, I'm going to ask Jennifer Wyatt to come up. She's going to talk with us about the family engagement policy, and we need to approve for her to submit the CCIP application, and she will tell you all about that.
The family engagement plan
Get up to them.
approved every year, and what we do is,
I think it's on. It's up there at the middle.
okay, so the school improvement plan, or not school improvement plan, sorry, the family engagement policy was created many years ago, and every year we address it with the parents, and we just ask them if it's parent-friendly, if it makes sense to them, because it's designed for them. So in the middle school, at our last meeting on May 5th, we addressed the parents then, and then on April 21st at the elementary school, we asked them if they had any questions or if they wanted to change anything. And then we also email all the parents and asking them not attend the meetings, we ask them if they would like to change anything. For the most part, they tweak it a little bit, but they never say that they want to change anything. So it's the same as last year. All the teachers went through and changed all the, just little lingo that we might be changing next year, and all the dates. So that's all that's changed from last year. Do we do the CIP next? Okay. And then also, I need permission from you guys, approval to submit the CCIP application. That is the North Carolina Continuous Comprehensive Improvement Plan, and that covers federal funds, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. We do this every year, and this year it is due June 30th. So I need two separate approvals.
Do we have the information on the CCIP? Is there paper?
That's for our federal grant funds
Okay.
that you saw on the budget line to receive those grants.
Make a motion to approve the family engagement policy.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion is approved.
Make a motion to approve Jennifer Wyatt to submit the North Carolina Continuous Comprehensive Improvement Plan.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Motion is approved. Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you.
All right, next, Ryan Hatley will come up and talk to us about the beginning teacher support plan, and it needs approval also.
Good afternoon, how y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
At the October 2025 State Board meeting, the NC State Board of Education, policy TCED 016, which is entitled the Beginning Teacher Support Program, was updated. The North Carolina State Board of Education approved the following changes, which the first one was a documented process for identifying and verifying all BTs must address the following: the completion of the recent graduate survey by the beginning teacher, also known as a BT, and the employer survey by the principal of the school during the BT's first year of teaching, following the completion of an approved educator preparation program. As part of the requirements to measure the performance of the educator preparation program stated in the General Statutes 115C-269.35. The surveys will be administered at the end of the applicable year. The second change is a plan for implementing a sound BT induction process. Teachers with fewer than 3 years of experience, regardless of licensure type and licensure pathway, for example, a temporary license, a residency license, and initial professional license, are required to participate in the Beginning Teacher Support Program for 3 years. When the Beginning Teacher Support Program policy changes, local Beginning Teacher Support plans must be updated to reflect the current policy. The process for updating the Beginning Teacher Support Plan includes local school board approval before submission to our Regional Education Facilitator for state approval. The last time Piedmont Community Charter Beginning Teacher Support Plan was updated and submitted for approval was February 2021. Even though our current Beginning Teacher Support Plan already included some of the necessary changes, I have worked with our Regional Education Facilitator to make all the necessary changes to our Beginning Teacher Support Plan to meet the new requirements set by the State Board of Education. The changes are highlighted in yellow in your attached document, which I will highlight for you. I'll go over them for you. The first one you see in the very opening paragraph, we see that we had to include that alternatively licensed teachers are issued either a permit to teach, an emergency, or a residency license with specific requirements for each licensure type, which may include completing a licensure program within a 3-year period. The head of school will verify eligibility of BTs for a continuing license and assist Piedmont Community Charter School in following the North Carolina State Board of Education requirement for all required licensure test. The second or the next update is found in identifying beginning teachers. We see that our process for identifying and verifying all BTs begin with making sure they are teachers with fewer than 3 years of experience, regardless of licensure type and licensure pathway. Example, temporary license, residency license, and a professional license. We also had to include the next one down, that teachers with 3 or more of years of experience are excluded or do not have to participate in the beginning teacher support program. On the second page, we see that we had to change that a beginning teacher has access to the optimal working conditions guidelines. Instead of actually giving them that, they should have access to it. And then the bulk of the adjustments come in the mentor assessment requirements, which starts about halfway down the page. It says each beginning teacher is assigned a mentor with the requirements outlined in the state board policy, GC 115C-296.3, and in the beginning teacher support standards Gap 2 guidelines. Retired teachers are eligible to serve as mentors. While information from the stakeholders are valued and taken into consideration, the principal shall determine which mentor teacher best meets the needs of each new teacher and shall assign the most appropriate mentor teacher to the new teacher, with priority consideration for mentors rated as distinguished or accomplished in the NCEES, which is the North Carolina Educator Evaluation System. Distinguished means a teacher has received ratings of distinguished on 3 of the 5 standards, to include standard 4 on the most recent summative evaluation, or standard 4 for teachers on an abbreviated evaluation. Accomplished means a teacher has received ratings of accomplished on 3 of the 5 standards, to include standard 4 on the most recent summative evaluation, or standard 4 on an abbreviated evaluation. If a principal determines that a teacher rated as proficient or a retired teacher is the most appropriate mentor for a new teacher, the principal shall maintain records of the reason for that determination. In a situation where a teacher does not have an evaluation from the previous year, we will use the most recently available evaluation for the teachers. Teachers without evaluation data for 2 or more consecutive years shall not be eligible to serve as mentor teachers unless the mentor is a retired teacher. No mentor whose evaluation falls below the proficient level may continue to serve as a mentor to a beginning teacher, regardless of existing mentor-mentee relationships. A teacher may be a mentor at a different school building from which the mentor is assigned if the principal of each school and the mentor teacher approve the assignment. The mentor is rated at least accomplished, received ratings of accomplished or higher on 3 of the 5 standards, including standard 4 on the most recent summative, or on standard 4 of an abbreviated evaluation. And the BT's principal maintains a record of the reasons for selecting the mentor from a different school building. And then the last few changes you can find are at the bottom of page 3. The BT mentor and their director will sign the professional development plan, also known as a PDP, at each meeting, beginning, middle, and end of year. The head of school, school directors, and assistant directors will be responsible for the implementation of the beginning teacher support plan. And then on the final page, in observations procedures for BTs, it now states that we will ensure all teachers, principals, and peer evaluators are trained on the evaluation process at the beginning of each school year, which takes place during our beginning of year meetings and within 2 weeks of the teacher's first day of work for all other hires. And that we had to include there, the last thing is the first observation for all BTs will have a pre-conference. So those are the changes that were made to the beginning teacher support plan. Does anybody have any questions concerning that? I think I read every educational acronym I had, so just let me know.
Thank you for reading that.
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion to approve the beginning teacher support program in order for the changes that Mr. Hatley presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatley. And next, I'll go over the calendar items. Our next board meeting is May. You know what? I didn't change that. We're just gonna say, May
June 16th
22nd
is
is
the next.
graduation, and the board meeting is June
16th,
16th.
yeah. I thought you might have left it on there on purpose, but.
Nope, I did not, thank you.
Okay, moving to item C is academic committee report. Ms. Gardner's not here tonight, so we do not have a report for that. Moving to item C, athletics committee.
All right, athletic committee. Woo, woo. Middle school, the ladies soccer team won the Carolina Beltway Athletic Conference Championship. Pamela Tejad Largo scored the winning goal for the Lady Patriots. Olivia Groudon, Caitlin Abram, and Marina Pullum were selected to the all-tournament team. The ladies middle school softball team made it to the second round of the playoffs. Sydney Blair was selected as all-tournament team. The boys baseball team finished 5th in the conference with a 6-5 record and did lose in the first round of the playoffs. Lamont Horton was selected as all-tournament. And the Carolina Beltway Athletic Conference has made a proposal to start a girls' middle school flag football team. So it would be 5 games, 5-on-5, and the team would consist of 10 to 12 players. So schools are having interest meetings. However, it would be based upon administration approval, but there's a lot of traction for that in the Carolina Beltway Athletic Conference. For high school, baseball finished 3rd in the conference and lost in the first round of the state playoffs. Softball finished 3rd in the conference and lost in the first round of the playoffs. Girls tennis finished 4th in the conference. They lost in the second round of the state playoffs. Men's golf finished 4th place. We did have a player make it to regionals, but unfortunately due to a hand injury, he wasn't able to go. And then women's soccer finished 4th in the conference and did lose in the second round of the playoffs. So that's our update for that. And hopefully next meeting I will have our finalized GPA so we can celebrate them as well. Thank you.
Moving to facilities committee, we did have a kickoff meeting for our summer project last week, and we're doing a site visit tomorrow, so everybody's on board and ready to get that started on June 1st. So, that's all I got for that. And then governance committee.
Governance committee, you'll recall, last time we read through the exclusion policy, which is now being added to the Series 300 of the policies manual. And what we've dealt with this language quite a bit because you'll recall earlier in the school year we added it to the charter. And so do we need to read through? We need to read it out loud? All right, so here's the exclusion policy that we're reading for the second time in order to add it to the policies manual. It's policy number 304.16.1, exclusion. The school may exclude a student for just cause if otherwise legally permissible and as defined by school policy. Exclusion may involve refusing to enroll an applicant or removing a currently enrolled student. Just cause shall involve grounds that reasonably indicate that the child poses a threat of harm to him or herself or others, or poses a threat of substantial disruption or material interference with the school's operations. Any child who is to be excluded is entitled to due process as defined by school policy before a final exclusion decision. Any exclusion decision shall be permanent unless otherwise retracted or modified by the board in its sole discretion. Any questions about the exclusion policy?
motion to approve the slate of contracts as presented in the closed session.
Second.